Rich's son refused to visit mother on her deathbed. When the nurse showed him the diary, he lost everything. Nathaniel Hawthorne stood in the grand foyer of his opulent Los Angeles mansion, the air heavy with the scent of expensive cologne and the faint echo of classical music drifting from the ornate speakers. The towering ceilings were adorned with intricate chandeliers that sparkled like diamonds, casting a warm glow over the polished marble floors. Despite the wealth surrounding him, Nathaniel felt an emptiness that gnawed at his insides. He glanced at the gilded mirrors reflecting back his well-groomed image, the designer suit fitting perfectly, but they did little to mask the hollowness in his eyes. "Victor," Nathaniel called, his voice echoing slightly in the vast space. Victor, his mentor and business advisor, appeared from the adjacent room, a stack of documents in hand. He was a man in his late 50s, with salt and pepper hair and a sharp gaze that had seen both triumphs and failures in the world of high finance. "Ah, Nathaniel," Victor replied, a hint of concern threading through his tone. "I've been reviewing the projections for the new venture. I think we're on the verge of something great here." Nathaniel smirked, his confidence almost palpable. "Of course we are. With the right investments and my connections, we'll be unstoppable. I can already see the headlines." He waved his hand dismissively, as if brushing away any doubt. Victor's brow furrowed. "You know, sometimes it's not just about the money. It's about the relationships you build along the way. Have you considered Dash?" "Relationships?" Nathaniel interrupted, his tone sharp. "You mean like the one I have with my mother?" He chuckled, but it lacked humor, a mere facade to cover his discomfort. "She's been sick for a while now. I can't say I'm surprised. I have a business to run, Victor. I can't just drop everything." Victor sighed, his expression serious. "Nathaniel, your mother is Dash. She's in the hospital, yes." "I know." Nathaniel cut him off. "But it's not like she's going anywhere. Besides, I'm busy making a name for myself." He turned his gaze back to the documents, effectively dismissing Victor's concerns. Meanwhile, in a starkly different environment, Beatrice Hawthorne lay in a hospital bed, surrounded by the sterile scent of antiseptic and the beeping of machines that monitored her fragile condition. The room was dimly lit, a contrast to the brightness Nathaniel basked in at home. Beatrice's once vibrant face was now pale and drawn, her eyes filled with a mixture of pain and longing. She had always been the epitome of grace and strength, a woman who had sacrificed so much for her son's success. Now, as she lay there, she felt the weight of her unspoken regrets. Clara, a compassionate nurse in her late 20s, entered the room with a soft smile. She had been assigned to Beatrice's care and quickly became her confidant. Clara had a knack for making her patients feel at ease, her presence a balm for their worries. "Good morning, Mrs. Hawthorne," she said gently, adjusting the blankets around Beatrice. "How are you feeling today?" Beatrice managed a faint smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. "As well as one can feel in a place like this, I suppose," she replied, her voice a whisper. "Thank you for asking, Clara." Clara took a seat beside the bed, her expression attentive. "I've been thinking about the stories you shared with me. Your memories of Nathaniel, they're beautiful. It's clear you have so much love for him." Beatrice's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I do love him, but I fear he's lost his way." She paused, her voice trembling as she continued. "I did everything I could to give him a good life, but I wonder if it was enough. I wish I could have taught him the values that truly matter." Clara nodded, her heart aching for the woman before her. "It's not too late. Sometimes, all it takes is a little push for someone to realize what's important." "Perhaps," Beatrice sighed, gazing out the window at the distant city skyline. "But sometimes, a push isn't enough." Her voice cracked, and Clara reached out, giving her hand a reassuring squeeze. Back at the mansion, Nathaniel was oblivious to his mother's turmoil. He was in the midst of preparing for a lavish party that evening, where the elite of Los Angeles would gather to celebrate his latest business achievement. He surrounded himself with glitz and glamour, but the laughter and music that filled the air felt distant, like echoes of a life he had chosen over genuine connections. As the evening approached, Nathaniel stood before the mirror in his expansive bedroom, adjusting his cufflinks. His phone buzzed incessantly on the dresser, notifications lighting up the screen. He glanced at it, seeing multiple missed calls from Beatrice. He sighed, silencing the phone and turning his attention back to the mirror. "I'll call her later," he murmured to himself, trying to convince his own conscience. The party was in full swing by the time Nathaniel arrived at the extravagant venue he had rented. Crystal chandeliers adorned the high ceilings, and the room was filled with the chatter of guests dressed in designer gowns and tailored suits. It was a spectacle of wealth, but Nathaniel felt a strange sense of isolation amidst the crowd. People laughed, clinked glasses, and complimented him on his successes, but he couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was missing. "Nat, you're the man of the hour," shouted one of his friends, Mark, a tall and boisterous man who thrived in the limelight. "Look at this place. You've outdone yourself." "Thanks, Mark," Nathaniel replied, forcing a smile. "I just wanted to celebrate a little." "Celebrate? More like flaunt," Mark laughed, slapping Nathaniel on the back with a jovial force. "But hey, you've earned it. Just don't forget about us little people when you're up there in the clouds, will ya?" Nathaniel chuckled, but it felt hollow. As the night went on, he found himself wandering through the crowd, laughing at jokes that didn't amuse him and accepting compliments that felt insincere. He caught a glimpse of his reflection in a nearby mirror, and for a fleeting moment, he didn't recognize the man staring back at him, a man surrounded by opulence yet utterly alone. Meanwhile, Clara was still with Beatrice, who was recounting cherished memories of Nathaniel's childhood. "He was such a sweet boy," Beatrice reminisced, a faint smile gracing her lips. "Always so curious, always asking questions. I remember the time he built a treehouse in the backyard. He was so proud of it, convinced it was the best in the neighborhood." Clara leaned in, captivated by the warmth of Beatrice's words. "What did you say to him?" "I told him it was magnificent." Beatrice chuckled softly, her eyes shining with nostalgia. "I climbed up there with him, and we spent hours talking about his dreams. He wanted to be an astronaut back then, so full of hope." Clara felt a pang of sadness at the thought of the distance that had grown between mother and son. "And now, I fear he's lost sight of those dreams," Beatrice replied, her voice tinged with sorrow. "He's so focused on wealth and success that he's forgotten the joy of simply being alive, of connecting with the people who matter." As the hours passed, Nathaniel's phone buzzed again, but this time it was a text message from Victor. "Have you spoken to your mother? She's not well, Nathaniel. Please consider visiting her." Nathaniel stared at the message, his heart racing. He knew he should care, but the party called to him, the laughter and music drowning out any sense of guilt. He pocketed the phone and forced another smile as he mingled, pushing aside the nagging feeling that something was terribly wrong. But in that hospital room, as Clara listened to Beatrice share her heart, the weight of unspoken words hung in the air, a testament to the love that yearned to bridge the chasm between mother and son. In the dimly lit hospital room, the sound of the heart monitor beeped steadily, a rhythmic reminder of life's fragility. Beatrice Hawthorne lay frail on the white sheets, her once vibrant spirit now diminished to a whisper of its former self. Her chestnut hair, which used to cascade like a waterfall, now lay limp against her pillow. The walls of the room were adorned with faded photographs of better days, family vacations, birthday parties, and a young Nathaniel with a beaming smile, oblivious to the heartache that would later define their relationship. Clara, the compassionate nurse assigned to her care, entered the room quietly, her presence a comforting balm to Beatrice's weary soul. Clara had been working at the hospital for several years, and something about Beatrice's gentle demeanor and poignant stories had struck a chord deep within her. "Good morning, Mrs. Hawthorne," Clara said softly, adjusting the blanket over Beatrice's thin legs. "How are you feeling today?" Beatrice turned her head slightly, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I'm still here, Clara," she replied with a faint smile. "But my heart feels heavy. I wish things were different with Nathaniel." Clara sat down beside her, taking her hand in hers. "It's never too late, you know. Have you thought about reaching out to him? Perhaps he'll come if you ask him." Beatrice shook her head slowly, a deep sorrow etched on her face. "You don't understand, dear. Nathaniel has been so focused on his ambitions that he's forgotten what truly matters. I fear I've lost him forever. Maybe he just needs a little push to remember," Clara suggested gently. "You've shared so many wonderful memories with him. Would you like to talk about those?" A flicker of warmth ignited in Beatrice's eyes, and she nodded. "Yes, I would like that very much. It's been so long since I've thought about those times." As Clara settled in, she encouraged Beatrice to share her stories. "Tell me about the time you took Nathaniel to the beach. I remember you mentioning that he loved building sandcastles." Beatrice chuckled softly, her voice laced with nostalgia. "Oh, that was one of my favorite memories. Nathaniel was so excited. He must have been 5 or 6. He insisted on building the tallest sandcastle in the world. We spent hours perfecting it. And when the tide began to come in, he stood guard like a knight, determined to protect his creation." "What happened?" Clara asked, leaning in with interest. "The waves came crashing in, and he was devastated to see his masterpiece washed away," Beatrice recounted, a hint of sadness in her tone. "But then he looked up at me and said, 'Mom, we can build it again.' It was beautiful while it lasted. That was the moment I realized how resilient he was." Clara smiled, captivated by the vivid imagery. "That's a beautiful story. It shows how much he looked up to you, Mrs. Hawthorne. He must have cherished those moments." Beatrice's expression turned somber again, her voice barely above a whisper. "I always tried to teach him about love, kindness, and the importance of family. But as he grew older, he became consumed by wealth and status. I fear I failed him." "No, you didn't fail him," Clara reassured her. "He may just need some time to find his way back. Sometimes, people get lost in their pursuits and forget what truly matters." Beatrice sighed deeply, her gaze drifting to the window where the sun cast a golden hue across the room. "I wish I could have shown him how to balance ambition with love. I wanted him to be successful, but I also wanted him to know that family is what gives life its meaning." Meanwhile, across town in Nathaniel's lavish mansion, he was surrounded by the trappings of his success. Dressed in an expensive tailored suit, he paced back and forth in his office, discussing his latest business venture with Victor, his mentor and advisor. This, something beautiful, an expression of love that could not be extinguished, even in the face of death. In the heart of Los Angeles, the bustling city continued to thrive outside, oblivious to the emotional storm brewing within the walls of the hospital. For Beatrice and Nathaniel, the journey toward understanding and healing had only just begun, but Clara was determined to be the guiding light in their path, ensuring that love would ultimately triumph over the shadows of regret. Nathaniel Hawthorne leaned back in his plush leather chair, the warm glow of the Los Angeles sun filtering through the expansive windows of his mansion. The walls were adorned with priceless art, and the floor was polished to a mirror-like sheen. But despite the opulence surrounding him, Nathaniel felt a profound emptiness. He gazed at his phone, the screen lighting up with several missed calls from his mother, Beatrice. Each one was a reminder of her frail condition in the hospital, but he dismissed them, choosing instead to focus on a new business venture he was so eager to discuss with Victor, his mentor. "Look, Nathaniel, this is a significant opportunity," Victor said, leaning forward, his voice earnest. "But you need to understand the importance of family, especially during times like these." Nathaniel waved a hand dismissively. "Come on, Victor. Business is business. My mother has always been. Well, she's always been there. It's not like she's going anywhere. I need to secure this deal first." Victor frowned, his concern evident. "Nathaniel, your mother's health is deteriorating. You can't ignore her forever. Money won't fill that void. Nathaniel shifted uncomfortably in his chair, avoiding Victor's gaze. I'll go see her eventually. Right now, I have to focus on my future. Meanwhile, in the hospital, Beatrice lay in her bed. The beeping machine's a constant reminder of her fragile state. She had not seen Nathaniel in weeks, and each passing day felt heavier on her heart. Clara, the compassionate nurse assigned to her care, entered the room with a warm smile. "Good morning, Beatrice. How are we feeling today?" Clara asked, her voice gentle, as she adjusted the blankets around Beatrice. "Better, I suppose," Beatrice replied softly, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "But I can't help but worry about Nathaniel. I haven't seen him in so long." Clara sat down in the chair beside her bed, taking Beatrice's frail hand in hers. "He's a busy man, Beatrice, but I believe he'll come around. Sometimes people need a little push to realize what's important." Beatrice sighed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I just wish I could reach him. He's always been so focused on wealth and success. I hoped he would learn the value of family, but..." Her voice trailed off, and Clara could see the weight of her regrets. "Tell me about your favorite memories with him," Clara suggested, hoping to lift Beatrice's spirits. With a wistful smile, Beatrice began to recount stories of Nathaniel's childhood, his laughter, his first steps, and the countless hours they spent playing in the garden. He was so curious, always asking questions. "I remember one evening, he asked me why the stars twinkled. We spent hours lying on the grass, looking up at the sky, talking about everything and nothing at all." Clara listened intently, jotting down notes. "These stories are beautiful, Beatrice. They need to be preserved. You should write them down." Beatrice's smile faded slightly. "I wish I had the strength to write them myself, but perhaps I can share them with you, and you can help me." As the days passed, Nathaniel continued to prioritize his business dealings over the growing concerns for his mother. In a high-powered meeting with potential investors, he exuded confidence. "We're on the brink of a breakthrough. This project will make us all a lot of money," he boasted, leaning back in his chair, his expression smug. One of the investors, a seasoned businessman named Leonard, raised an eyebrow. "Nathaniel, it's impressive, but don't forget where you came from. Family is just as important as profits. You can't lose sight of what really matters." Nathaniel's smile faltered for a brief moment, but he quickly recovered. "I appreciate your concern, Leonard, but I assure you, my focus is unwavering. I have a vision, and I intend to see it through." As the meeting concluded, Nathaniel felt a strange sense of unease gnawing at him. He pushed the feeling aside, convincing himself that he was making the right choices. Yet, the fleeting moments of doubt lingered, shadowing him. Back in the hospital, Clara had become Beatrice's confidant, documenting her memories and emotions in a diary that she started to keep. Each day, she read old letters and photographs to Beatrice, sparking laughter and joyful tears. One afternoon, Beatrice's voice was choked with emotion as she shared her regrets. "I wanted to teach Nathaniel the importance of kindness, of giving back. But I fear I failed him. I was so busy providing for him that I neglected the lessons that truly matter." Clara squeezed Beatrice's hand, tears brimming in her eyes. "You've given him love, Beatrice. There's always a chance for him to learn. Maybe he just needs a little more time." "Time," Beatrice echoed, her voice heavy with sorrow. "How I wish I had more of it. I just hope he realizes before it's too late." One evening, as Nathaniel sat in his lavish home surrounded by empty champagne flutes and laughter, he felt a sudden wave of nostalgia wash over him. He wandered into his study, his eyes landing on an old photo album tucked away on a shelf. Curious, he pulled it down and began flipping through the pages. Memories flooded back his mother's warm smile, the way she would hold him close during thunderstorms, the countless adventures they had together. The innocent joy of childhood felt like a distant dream. Why did I push her away? Nathaniel whispered to himself, the weight of realization crashing down on him. He could almost hear her laughter, and it rang in stark contrast to the emptiness he felt now. Suddenly, he felt a compulsion to reach out to her. He picked up his phone, intending to call her, but paused as doubt crept in. What if she's disappointed in me? He thought, the fear of facing his mother's disappointment paralyzing him. He tossed the phone onto the couch, returning to the party, but the earlier joy faded, leaving him feeling hollow. At the hospital, Clara noticed Beatrice's health declining rapidly. She sat by her side, reading from the diary they had compiled together. Beatrice listened intently, her eyes shining with a mixture of happiness and sadness. "Clara, promise me something," Beatrice said, her voice frail but determined. "If Nathaniel comes, please give him my letter. I want him to know how much I love him, regardless of everything." Clara nodded, her heart aching. "Of course I will. He needs to hear this from you." As Beatrice closed her eyes, Clara continued reading from the diary, sharing stories of resilience, love, and the importance of family. Each word felt like a lifeline, a connection to the past that Beatrice cherished. Days turned into a blur, and Nathaniel's inner turmoil grew. Despite the facade of success, he felt increasingly isolated. He found himself in a bar, drowning his sorrows in whiskey, when he received a call from Clara. "Hello?" he answered, his voice thick with alcohol. "Nathaniel, it's Clara. I need to talk to you about your mother. It's urgent." A knot twisted in Nathaniel's stomach. "What's wrong?" he asked, panic rising. "She's deteriorating. I think you should come to the hospital," Clara urged, her voice steady yet filled with emotion. Nathaniel's heart raced. I'll be right there." He threw a handful of cash on the bar and stumbled out, feeling the weight of dread settle over him. The drive to the hospital was a blur, each traffic light stretching into eternity. When he finally arrived, he rushed through the sterile corridors, his heart pounding in his chest. As he entered Beatrice's room, the sight before him struck him like a blow. Beatrice lay frail and weak, her face pale against the white sheets. Clara, sitting beside her, looked up with concern. "Nathaniel," Beatrice murmured, her voice barely audible. He rushed to her side, taking her delicate hand in his. "Mom, I'm here. I'm so sorry," he choked out, tears welling up in his eyes. Clara stepped back, giving them space, but she kept a watchful eye on them. "I'll be just outside if you need me," she said softly before leaving the room. Beatrice smiled weakly, her eyes reflecting both love and pain. "My dear Nathaniel, I've missed you so much." Nathaniel's heart clenched. "I should have been here. I should have called. I just got lost in everything else." Beatrice squeezed his hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "You have always been my precious boy. I only wanted you to understand what truly matters in life." "Mom, I promise I'll do better. I'll make things right," he said, his voice breaking as he fought back tears. As Beatrice's breathing weakened, she looked at him with a mixture of hope and sorrow. "There's so much I want to tell you. I've written a letter, but you must know, I love you unconditionally." Nathaniel felt the gravity of her words, the weight of the missed opportunities pressing down on him. "I love you too, Mom. I'm so sorry for everything." Tears streamed. Clara sat by Beatrice's bedside, the soft beeping of the machines around them creating a rhythm that was both comforting and disconcerting. The dim light of the hospital room cast gentle shadows on the worn-out wallpaper, each wrinkle in the fabric telling stories of the countless patients who had passed through these walls. Beatrice lay frail and pale, her long, dark hair now streaked with gray, spread across the white pillow like a delicate halo. Yet, her eyes still sparkled with a wisdom that had not faded with time. "Do you remember the summer Nathaniel turned 10? Beatrice asked, her voice barely above a whisper, but vibrant with nostalgia. Clara leaned in closer, her heart aching at the sight of the woman who had once been so full of life, now reduced to this. "I do," Clara replied softly, encouraging her to continue. He was so full of energy, always running around the garden. You must have chased him all day. Beatrice chuckled lightly, a sound that was both joyous and tinged with sadness. Oh, I did. He had so much spirit. I remember he wanted to catch fireflies in a jar. We spent hours outside, and when he finally caught one, he was so proud. He turned to me and said, "Look, Mama, I've caught a star." Her smile faded a bit, replaced by a distant look. I wish he could see the stars again. Clara felt a lump in her throat as she watched Beatrice's expression change. He's still that child inside, I believe. He just needs a little reminding, she said gently, hoping to soothe the woman's evident pain. Reminding. Beatrice echoed, her voice trembling. I've tried so hard to teach him what really matters, but I fear I've failed him. I should have been there for him more, instead of getting lost in the whirlwind of our lives. Clara reached out and squeezed Beatrice's hand, feeling the frailty of her grasp. You've done your best, Beatrice. Sometimes life takes us on unexpected paths, but it's not too late. He still has time to learn. Beatrice turned her gaze to the ceiling, as if searching for answers in the sterile tiles above. What if he doesn't want to learn? What if he's too far gone? Her voice cracked, and Clara could see tears glistening in her eyes. I believe he has a heart that can still be reached, Clara reassured her. But he needs to understand your love, your sacrifices. You should share your stories with him, your memories. They might spark something in him. Beatrice sighed deeply, a sound filled with both resignation and hope. I wish I could write him a letter, express everything I feel before it's too late. Why not? I can help you with that, Clara suggested, her heart racing at the idea of allowing Beatrice to pour out her soul onto paper. Beatrice's eyes lit up momentarily. You would do that for me? Of course, Clara replied, her voice steady. Let's start with how you feel about him. What do you want him to know? Beatrice nodded slowly, her mind racing through the memories. Tell him that I'm proud of him. Despite everything, he's my son, and I've always loved him more than he could ever know. Clara grabbed a notepad from the table beside them, flipping it open to a fresh page. And what about the moments you cherished together? Those times when he made you laugh. Write about the fireflies, Beatrice said, her voice gaining strength as the memories unfolded. And how I promised him that he could always catch stars, no matter how old he got. I want him to remember that joy. Clara scribbled down the words, trying to capture the essence of Beatrice's feelings. What else? She prompted gently. I want him to know that life is fleeting, and it's the love we share that lasts. I regret not spending more time with him when he was growing up. I was so busy trying to provide for him, I forgot to just be there. Clara paused, looking up to meet Beatrice's gaze. I think he needs to hear that. He may not realize how much you sacrificed for him. Yes, Beatrice agreed, a tear rolling down her cheek. He needs to know that I wanted the best for him, but not just in wealth. I wanted him to be happy, to love, to be loved. Clara continued to write, capturing the raw emotion pouring from Beatrice's heart. And what about forgiveness? Do you want him to forgive you? Beatrice's expression shifted, a flicker of regret passing over her features. Yes, I hope he can forgive me for not being the mother he needed. I hope he can forgive himself for the distance that grew between us. Clara finished writing and looked at Beatrice, who was now visibly exhausted. You've said so much, Beatrice. This letter is going to mean the world to him. Beatrice smiled weakly, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. Thank you, Clara. You've been a light in my darkness. Just then, the door creaked open and a nurse entered, her face brightening as she caught sight of the two women. How are we doing in here? She asked cheerfully. Just writing a letter, Clara replied, her voice full of warmth. The nurse smiled, but then her expression turned serious. That's wonderful. It's important to keep those connections alive. As the nurse checked Beatrice's vitals, Clara leaned closer to Beatrice, whispering, Would you like me to read the letter back to you? Yes, please, Beatrice replied, her voice barely a whisper, yet filled with anticipation. Clara cleared her throat and began to read, her voice steady and full of emotion. Dear Nathaniel, I want you to know that I've always loved you, more than you could ever imagine. I remember the summer you caught the fireflies and how you told me you had caught a star. As Clara read, Beatrice closed her eyes, allowing the words to wash over her. She could feel the weight of her regrets lifting, replaced by a sense of peace that she had longed for. When Clara finished reading, Beatrice opened her eyes, a small smile gracing her lips. It's beautiful, she whispered, her heart swelling with hope. He needs to hear this. Clara nodded, her own heart aching for the mother and son who had been torn apart by misunderstandings and the passage of time. I'll make sure he gets it. You deserve to reconnect with him. I just hope he's willing to listen, Beatrice said, her voice trembling slightly. Clara squeezed her hand gently. He may surprise you. Sometimes it takes a little push to open someone's heart. You've given him the key. As the evening wore on, Clara stayed by Beatrice's side, sharing stories of her own family of love and loss, and the importance of cherishing every moment. Beatrice listened intently, her heart swelling with gratitude for the connection they had forged in such a short time. Thank you, Clara, Beatrice said softly. You've reminded me of what truly matters. I may not have much time left, but I want to leave this world knowing I tried to reach my son. Clara smiled, her heart aching for the woman who had fought so hard for her family. You've already made a difference, Beatrice, just by being you. As they continued to talk, the shadows lengthened in the room, and the weight of their conversation hung in the air like a promise waiting to be fulfilled. It was a bittersweet moment, filled with hope and heartache, as they both recognized the fragility of life and the enduring power of love. Nathaniel leaned against the polished marble bar, the golden lights of the lavish party flickering above him like a constellation of stars. The laughter of the guests echoed around him, punctuated by the clinking of glasses and the soft strains of a live band playing in the corner. Yet, despite the opulence wrapping him like a warm blanket, Nathaniel felt a chill deep within. He glanced around at the crowd's smiling faces, designer outfits, and the endless chatter of light-hearted banter. They were all there to celebrate him, to toast his latest venture, a new tech startup poised to make him even richer. But the emptiness gnawed at him, a silent reminder that something vital was missing. Hey, Nathaniel, you've got to try this cocktail. It's fantastic, shouted one of his close friends, Jake, as he approached, holding a vibrant drink garnished with an elaborate twist of citrus. Yeah, maybe later, Nathaniel replied absently, his gaze drifting toward the shimmering skyline of Los Angeles visible through the enormous glass windows. I gotta take care of a few things first. Jake frowned, his brow furrowing with concern. You've been saying that for a while now. You should really enjoy this moment. We're all here for you, man. Nathaniel forced a smile, but his heart wasn't in it. Thanks, Jake. I appreciate it, but I just have a lot on my mind. Is this about your mom? Jake asked, lowering his voice as if the question were a taboo topic. Nathaniel stiffened at the mention of Beatrice, his mother. He had been avoiding her calls, and now she was in the hospital, clinging to life. But the thought of visiting her filled him with dread. He didn't want to confront the mess of emotions that lay tangled within him. Let's not talk about that here, Nathaniel said, his tone sharper than he intended. Jake raised his hands in a gesture of surrender, understanding the unspoken boundary. As Jake walked away, Nathaniel's mind drifted back to the previous week, when Clara had called him to update him on Beatrice's condition. He had brushed her off, choosing instead to immerse himself in work and parties. After all, he thought, what could he possibly say to her? The guilt bubbled up, but he quickly suppressed it, focusing instead on the laughter echoing around him. Meanwhile, in a sterile hospital room painted in soft pastels, Clara sat beside Beatrice's bed, the steady beep of the monitor marking the rhythm of the woman's fading life. Beatrice's once bright eyes were now dim, reflecting the exhaustion of her battle against illness. Yet, there was a warmth in her gaze as she spoke to Clara, her voice a soft whisper. "I wish Nathaniel could understand how much I love him," Beatrice said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I've tried to show him, but he's so lost in this world of wealth. It's like he doesn't see anything beyond it." Clara nodded, her heart aching for the woman who had given so much of herself. "You've done your best, Beatrice. Sometimes, it takes a long time for people to realize what truly matters." Beatrice sighed, her frail hand clutching Clara's. "I just hope he doesn't regret it when it's too late. I've always wanted to teach him the value of love and family. I fear I've failed him." "You haven't failed," Clara reassured, wiping a tear from her cheek. "You've given him a good life. He just needs to find his way back." As they shared these intimate moments, Clara couldn't help but feel a sense of urgency to preserve Beatrice's stories. She began jotting down their conversations in a small journal, capturing the essence of Beatrice's love, her regrets, and her hopes for Nathaniel. Back at the party, Nathaniel's thoughts spiraled further into turmoil. He could feel the weight of his choices pressing down on him, a reminder of the phone call he had so easily dismissed. He glanced at his reflection in a nearby mirror, adjusting his tie and forcing a confident smile. But deep down, he was starting to feel the discontent rise, like bile in his throat. Suddenly, a commotion erupted in the center of the room, drawing his attention. He turned to see Jake arguing with another guest, a sharp-dressed investor named Mark. Nathaniel knew Mark had a reputation for being brutally honest, and the tension in the air was palpable. "Listen, Nathaniel," Mark said, pointing a finger at him as he stepped closer. "You're doing great work, but don't forget where you came from. You're losing sight of what really matters. Family is everything." Nathaniel's heart raced at the words. "What do you know about my family?" he snapped, his frustration boiling over. "You don't understand my life." Mark crossed his arms, unflinching. "I might not know your family, but I see the way you've been distancing yourself. You think success will fill that emptiness, but it won't. Trust me." "Maybe I don't need your advice," Nathaniel retorted, the anger surging through him. "I'm perfectly fine without it." Mark shook his head. "You're playing a dangerous game, Nathaniel. One day, you'll wake up and realize you've lost everything that truly matters. You might want to start thinking about that before it's too late." With that, Mark turned and walked away, leaving Nathaniel standing there, a whirlwind of emotions swirling inside him. He couldn't shake the feeling that Mark's words hit too close to home. The party continued around him, but Nathaniel felt like an outsider, trapped in a glass case of his own making. In a moment of clarity, Nathaniel excused himself, stepping outside onto the balcony. He leaned against the railing and took a deep breath of the cool night air, trying to calm the storm inside. He closed his eyes, and memories began flooding back his mother's laughter, the way she used to hold him when he was scared, and the countless nights they spent together reading books. But those memories were quickly overshadowed by the guilt of his recent choices. He pulled out his phone, hesitating as he stared at the screen. Should he call her? The thought of hearing her voice filled him with dread, but he also felt an overwhelming urge to connect. He wanted to reach out, to tell her he loved her, but the fear of facing the truth kept him frozen in place. Back in the hospital, Clara was reading aloud from her journal, the comforting sound of her voice filling the room. Beatrice listened intently, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I remember the day Nathaniel learned to ride a bicycle," Clara read, her voice soft and soothing. "He was so determined, even when he fell. I cheered him on, and when he finally succeeded, the joy on his face was priceless." "Oh, how I wish he could remember that joy," Beatrice murmured, a single tear escaping down her cheek. "He used to be so full of life." Clara paused, looking at Beatrice with empathy. "He still has that spark inside him. He just needs to be reminded of it." Beatrice nodded slowly, a flicker of hope igniting in her heart. If only he could hear these stories. Maybe they'd help him understand. Meanwhile, Nathaniel stood on the balcony, staring at the city lights, his heart heavy with regret. It was then that he realized he had to go to her. He couldn't let fear dictate his actions any longer. Beatrice was fighting for her life, and he needed to fight for their connection. With a surge of determination, he turned to head back inside. He would leave the party behind and make the trip to the hospital. As he walked through the crowd, he caught sight of Jake again, who raised an eyebrow in question. "Everything okay?" Jake asked, concern etched on his face. "Yeah, I need to take care of something important," Nathaniel replied, his voice steadier than he felt. "All right, man. Just remember, we're here for you," Jake said, clapping him on the shoulder. Nathaniel nodded, but his mind was already racing, thoughts of Beatrice flooding back. He had a chance to show her that he cared, to finally bridge the chasm that had formed between them. As he stepped into the cool night air, he felt a sense of urgency propelling him forward. He had to reach her before it was too late. The journey to the hospital felt like an eternity, but the closer he got, the more resolute he became. He would face the music, confront his fears, and hopefully find the words to say what he had long neglected to express. As Clara read the final lines from the journal, Beatrice closed her eyes, visualizing a world where her son and she could reconnect. She took a deep breath, her heart hopeful, wishing for a chance to mend the bonds that had frayed over time. And as Nathaniel approached the hospital, he felt the weight of the past lifting, replaced by a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late to reclaim what mattered most. Nathaniel had always been surrounded by opulence, yet he felt an emptiness that glittering chandeliers and expensive suits could not fill. As he sat in his office in the mansion, the sun streaming through the large glass windows, he reflected on the business deals that seemed to consume his life. His mentor, Victor, a seasoned businessman with a weathered face and wise eyes, had been trying to steer him toward a more meaningful path. "Success is great, Nathaniel, but at what cost?" Victor had asked, leaning back in his chair, his fingers steepled in front of him. "What are you truly building? Is it wealth or a legacy?" Nathaniel shrugged, dismissing the weight of Victor's words. "I'm building my empire, Victor. Isn't that what everyone wants?" He leaned back, attempting to project confidence, but deep down, he felt a nagging doubt. Meanwhile, in a quiet hospital room, Beatrice lay frail and pale, her breath shallow. The sterile smell of antiseptic filled the air, contrasting sharply with the vibrant memories that danced in her mind. Clara, the compassionate nurse with a gentle smile, had become more than just a caretaker. She was a confidant, a vessel for Beatrice's memories. "Do you remember the first time Nathaniel rode a bike?" Beatrice asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Clara, sitting by her bedside, leaned in closer, eager to hear the stories that shaped the woman's life. "I do," Clara replied with a smile. "You were so proud of him, Beatrice." "Oh, yes." Beatrice chuckled softly, her eyes sparkling with nostalgia. He was so determined. He fell countless times, but each time he got back up and tried again. I remember chasing after him, terrified he'd fall and hurt himself, but he just kept going. Clara felt a lump in her throat as Beatrice shared these cherished memories. "He sounds like a brave little boy," she said softly. "Yes, he was," Beatrice said, her voice trembling slightly. "But somewhere along the way, I lost him to this world of greed." She paused, her gaze drifting to the window where the sun cast warm rays across the room. "I tried to teach him about love, compassion, and the importance of family, but it seems he only heard the siren call of money." Clara reached out, gently squeezing Beatrice's hand. "It's never too late, Beatrice. Sometimes people just need a little push to find their way back." The sharp contrast of their worlds became clearer to Clara as she listened to Beatrice's regrets. She couldn't understand Nathaniel fully, as she had never experienced the kind of wealth he had. But she could see how a life consumed by ambition could lead one to neglect the very relationships that matter most. As Nathaniel returned to his lavish lifestyle, he found himself at a high-profile business meeting, surrounded by the elite, discussing deals that would further inflate his already excessive wealth. He sat at the head of the table, exuding confidence, yet there was a hollowness behind his bravado that even the finest suits couldn't disguise. "I'm telling you, this investment will yield unprecedented returns," Nathaniel boasted, his voice rising with enthusiasm. The investors nodded, intrigued by his ambitious projections, but one older gentleman, Mr. Thompson, leaned forward, his brow furrowed with skepticism. "While I appreciate your passion, Nathaniel, have you considered the human cost of your pursuits?" he questioned, his voice steady. "You speak of numbers and profits, but what about your family? What about your mother?" Nathaniel's expression soured at the mention of his mother. "My mother is fine," he snapped defensively. "She's just an obstacle I need to overcome." Mr. Thompson shook his head, disappointment etched on his face. "You may have wealth, but without the love of family, you're truly impoverished, Nathaniel. Don't lose sight of what truly matters." Nathaniel clenched his fist under the table, anger bubbling within him. Family? What had family ever done for him? He had worked tirelessly to forge his path, and yet these reminders of his mother's frailty felt like chains dragging him down. Back in the hospital, Clara continued to listen as Beatrice shared more of her heart. "I just wish I could reach him," Beatrice lamented, tears pooling in her eyes. "I've written him letters, but they remain unread, locked away in a drawer. He doesn't understand how much I love him." Clara's heart ached for Beatrice. "You've given him so much, Beatrice. Perhaps you could write one final letter, expressing everything you feel. Sometimes, the written word can reach places that spoken words cannot." Beatrice considered Clara's suggestion, wiping her tears with a trembling hand. "You're right. I want him to know that I'm proud of him, despite everything. I want him to know that my love for him is unconditional." With Clara's encouragement, Beatrice began to share her thoughts aloud, and Clara jotted them down hastily, her heart racing with the weight of Beatrice's emotions. As the sentences flowed, Beatrice's voice grew stronger, filled with a mixture of hope and sorrow. "I want him to know that I regret not being able to teach him the values that truly matter. That wealth is fleeting, but love lasts forever," Beatrice said, her voice breaking once more. "Tell him that he is my greatest joy and my deepest sorrow." Clara nodded, her own eyes glistening with tears. "He will hear you, Beatrice. I promise." As days passed and the hospital room dimmed, Clara made it a point to share memories of Nathaniel with Beatrice. One afternoon, she brought in an old photo album she had found in the storage room, filled with pictures from Nathaniel's childhood. "Look at this one," Clara said, flipping to a page filled with vibrant images of a younger Nathaniel, a boy full of life. There he was, grinning widely as he rode his bike for the first time, his mother running beside him, laughter echoing in the air. Beatrice's eyes lit up, and for a moment, the frailty of her condition faded. "Oh, my sweet Nathaniel. He was so full of joy." She traced her fingers over the photograph, reliving the moment. "His laughter was like music to my ears." Clara smiled, encouraged by the glimmer of life in Beatrice's eyes. "He seems like such a wonderful boy. Maybe if he could see these moments, he would remember who he truly is." "I pray he remembers," Beatrice whispered, her voice barely audible. "I pray he finds his way back to love." The days blurred into one another, and Nathaniel continued to bury himself in work, attempting to drown out the growing guilt that haunted him. But even in the midst of business deals and lavish parties, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. One evening, he sat in his office, staring at his reflection in the polished surface of his desk. The man looking back at him wore an expensive suit, yet his eyes held a deep sadness. He picked up his phone, hesitating as he thought about calling Beatrice. But the thought of hearing her weak voice filled him with dread. Suddenly, Victor's words echoed in his mind. What are you truly building? Is it wealth or a legacy? Nathaniel tossed his phone aside, frustration bubbling within him. He was tired of feeling like a puppet, pulled by the strings of expectations and responsibilities. In the quiet of the hospital, Clara continued to nurture the bond between Beatrice and her son through the stories they shared. Beatrice spoke more about her hopes and dreams for Nathaniel, emphasizing the lessons she wished she could impart to him. Empathy, Clara. It's the greatest gift one can give, Beatrice said, her voice gaining strength. I wish he could understand that life isn't about what you have, but who you have beside you. Clara nodded, absorbing every word. You're teaching him even now, Beatrice. He may not see it yet, but your love is breaking through the walls he's built. And as Beatrice spoke, Clara recorded her words, determined to keep Beatrice's spirit alive within the pages of her diary. The stories of a mother's love, a longing for connection, and the hope that her son would one day return to her. Days became weeks, and with each passing moment, Clara witnessed a transformation happening in Beatrice. Though her health continued to decline, Beatrice's spirit shone brightly as she poured her heart out. Clara was determined to ensure that Nathaniel would someday understand the depth of his mother's love and the lessons that lay within it. As Beatrice's voice grew weaker, Clara felt the urgency of her mission. She realized that time was slipping away, and she wanted Nathaniel to grasp the gravity of the situation before it was too late. The connection between mother and son hung in the balance, and Clara was determined to bridge that divide, even if it meant confronting Nathaniel and urging him to listen to his mother's heart. Nathaniel stood motionless in the opulent corridor of his mansion, the lavish decorations surrounding him a stark contrast to the turmoil brewing within. The evening had been filled with laughter and clinking glasses, the echo of superficial conversations floating through the air. Yet, he felt more isolated than ever, the weight of his choices pressing down on him like a heavy shroud. As the party swirled around him, Nathaniel's thoughts drifted back to his mother, Beatrice, lying in a hospital bed, her life slipping away. The distant buzz of his phone brought him back to reality. It was Clara again, the nurse who had been caring for Beatrice, calling with news he dreaded yet couldn't ignore. Mr. Hawthorne? Clara's voice crackled through the line, tinged with urgency. I think it's time you came to see your mother. Her condition has worsened. Nathaniel's heart sank. I can't right now, Clara. I have important guests. Maybe later? He could hear the disappointment in her silence, but the weight of his responsibilities felt insurmountable, the allure of wealth too strong to resist. Time isn't on your side, Nathaniel. She's asking for you. Clara pressed gently, concern lacing her tone. You may not have another chance. The words hung in the air, a silent reminder of the choices he had made. Ignoring his instincts, he ended the call, shoving his phone into his pocket as he turned back to the party. Laughter erupted around him, yet he felt like a ghost wandering through his own life. Later that night, Nathaniel found himself wandering into his dimly lit study, the walls lined with accolades and the spoils of his business ventures. He poured himself a drink, the amber liquid swirling in the glass mirroring the chaos in his mind. He flipped through an old photo album he had found earlier, a collection of fading memories of his childhood, of moments shared with Beatrice before the shadows of ambition had clouded their relationship. As he skimmed through the pages, a particular image caught his eye, a sun-drenched afternoon, him and his mother laughing in the backyard, their faces lit with pure joy. He could almost hear her laughter ringing in his ears. But the moment was fleeting, overshadowed by the reality of their current estrangement. Why did I let it come to this? He muttered to himself, frustration boiling inside him. He slammed the album shut, the sound reverberating in the silence of the room. Determined to drown out his thoughts, he downed the drink in one swift motion. The next morning, Nathaniel's phone buzzed once more, pulling him from an uneasy sleep. It was Clara again. Mr. Hawthorne, I'm afraid I need to speak with you urgently. Please come to the hospital, she said, her voice trembling slightly. A knot twisted in his stomach. Ignoring the call was no longer an option. He felt a mix of dread and guilt settle over him as he finally made his way to the hospital. The drive felt eternal, the world outside moving in slow motion while his heart raced. When he arrived at the hospital, the sterile environment felt suffocating. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, and the faint smell of antiseptic filled the air. He approached the nurse's station, his heart pounding as he asked for Beatrice's room. "Room 302, the nurse replied, offering a sympathetic smile. "She's been asking for you." Nathaniel took a deep breath and made his way down the corridor. Each step felt heavier than the last, the weight of his decisions pressing down on him. As he neared the door, he hesitated, a wave of doubt crashing over him. What would he say? How could he face her after all this time? Pushing the door open, he stepped inside, and the sight that met him shattered his heart. Beatrice lay frail and pale against the white sheets, her once vibrant spirit dimmed. Clara sat by her side, holding Beatrice's hand, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Oh, Nathaniel," Beatrice whispered, her voice barely audible. She turned her head towards him, a weak smile breaking through the pain etched on her face. "You came." He swallowed hard, the lump in his throat making it difficult to speak. I'm sorry, Mom. I should have been here sooner." Clara looked between them, sensing the gravity of the moment. She stood, her presence a silent comfort, and stepped outside, giving them space. Beatrice's eyes, though clouded with pain, sparkled with a warmth that Nathaniel had missed for so long. "I've been waiting for you, my dear. I wanted to tell you how much I love you." The words felt like a balm to Nathaniel's troubled soul, yet guilt gnawed at him. "I've been so caught up in everything. In work and dash." Stop. Beatrice interrupted gently, her frail hand reaching out to him. "You don't need to explain. I understand. Just, please, don't let this be the end between us." Nathaniel's heart raced at her words. "But I've been so selfish. I should have been here. I should have listened." Tears filled Beatrice's eyes as she shook her head. "It's never too late to change, Nathaniel. Life is fleeting, and what truly matters is the love we share, not the wealth we accumulate." Her words struck a chord deep within him. He felt the walls he had built around his heart begin to crumble, replaced by an overwhelming desire to reconnect. "I'm sorry, Mom. I promise I will change. I want to make things right." Beatrice smiled through her tears, her expression a mixture of sorrow and hope. "That's all I've ever wanted, my son, just to see you happy and loved." As Nathaniel leaned closer, the soft beeping of the machines around them seemed to fade into the background. He grasped her hand tightly, feeling the fragility of her existence. "I've missed you so much. I've been so lost without you." "I've missed you too, Nathaniel. You were my everything," she replied, her voice softening. "I always believed in you. You have a good heart. Don't ever forget that." Just then, Clara returned, holding a small notebook. "I've been documenting some of your mother's memories, Nathaniel," she said softly, her eyes filled with empathy. "Would you like to hear them?" Nathaniel nodded, his heart racing with anticipation. Clara opened the notebook and began to read aloud, her voice gentle and soothing. "This one is about the day you learned to ride a bike. Your mother was so proud of you, and you kept falling, but you never gave up." He listened intently, each word painting vivid pictures in his mind, rekindling lost moments and emotions. Beatrice chuckled softly at the memory, her eyes shining with nostalgia. "You were determined even then," she said, her voice filled with warmth. As Clara continued reading, Nathaniel felt the chasm that had formed between him and Beatrice begin to close. He realized how much he had taken for granted: the love, the sacrifices, the unwavering support of a mother who had always believed in him, even when he had lost his way. Finally, Clara reached the last entry and Nathaniel leaned forward, hanging on her every word. "And I hope that one day he will understand the importance of family, love, and kindness. I believe in him, and I will always be with him. no matter what. Tears streamed down Nathaniel's face as he heard the words of his mother resonate within him. The weight of regret felt heavy on his chest, but he also felt a flicker of hope igniting inside him. He looked at Beatrice, whose smile was both tender and bittersweet. "Mom, thank you for always believing in me," he said, his voice breaking. "I promise to honor your memory and the values you've instilled in me." Beatrice squeezed his hand, her strength waning but her spirit unwavering. "That's all I ask, Nathaniel. Live your life with love and compassion. That's the greatest legacy you can carry forward." Clara watched the exchange, a silent witness to the profound reconnection unfolding before her. She felt honored to be part of this moment, knowing how much it meant to both of them. As Nathaniel sat by his mother's side, he realized that life was a fragile thread, a tapestry woven with love, loss, and the choices we make. He had a chance to rewrite the narrative of his life, to embrace the values that truly mattered. And as he held Beatrice's hand, he knew he would never take that opportunity for granted again. Nathaniel stood in the sterile, dimly lit hospital room, his heart pounding in his chest. The steady beeping of the machines that surrounded his mother's frail body served as a harsh reminder of the reality he had been avoiding for so long. He had delayed his visit to Beatrice, thinking that time would stretch indefinitely, that he could afford to ignore her presence and focus on his own ambitions. But now, standing at the threshold, he felt a wave of regret wash over him. This was not the way he had intended to confront his mother, and the weight of his choices hit him hard. His mother lay there, a fragile shadow of the vibrant woman he had once known. Beatrice's once bright eyes were now clouded, and her skin had taken on a pallid hue. Nathaniel felt a lump form in his throat as he took a hesitant step inside the room, the smell of antiseptic filling his nostrils. He could hear Clara's soft voice, soothing and gentle, as she spoke to Beatrice, reading from a diary she had begun to keep, chronicling the whispers of their shared memories. "Mom!" Nathaniel's voice trembled, a mixture of uncertainty and fear. Beatrice's eyes fluttered open, and a faint smile crossed her lips, though it was tinged with sadness. "Sweetheart," she rasped, struggling to find her breath. "You came." I had to," he stammered, his heart racing. The words felt inadequate, but they were all he could muster. He approached her bedside, his hands trembling as he reached for hers. They were cold, and he felt a pang of guilt clawing at him. "I'm so sorry for not being here sooner." Beatrice's gaze softened, but there was a lingering sadness in her eyes. "I understand, Nathaniel. You've always been so focused on your pursuits." Her voice was barely above a whisper, but it echoed in his mind like a haunting reminder of his neglect. "I was caught up in everything," he said, struggling to keep the tremor out of his voice. I thought I had time." "You never really do you?" she replied, her eyes glazed with unshed tears. "Time slips away when you least expect it. I want to tell you about the things that really matter." His heart raced as Clara gently placed a diary on the bedside table, her eyes filled with compassion. Nathaniel glanced at her, then back at his mother, whose face bore the weight of unspoken words. "Mom," he said, his voice breaking, "I've been so selfish. All I could think about was the inheritance, the business. I never stopped to think about you." Beatrice smiled softly, a bittersweet expression that tugged at Nathaniel's heartstrings. "Nathaniel, my love, it's never too late to change. I just wanted you to know that love and family are the true treasures, not the wealth you chase." He felt tears prick at his eyes as he remembered the warmth of their childhood moments, the times when they would laugh together, when he was her whole world. "I miss those times," he confessed, his voice thick with emotion. "I miss you." Clara stood quietly to the side, witnessing this fragile reunion, her heart aching for both of them. She had seen the effects of Nathaniel's choices, how they had created a chasm between him and his mother. "Do you remember the stories I used to tell you, Nathaniel?" Beatrice continued, her voice softening. "The tales of kindness and compassion? Those values are your true inheritance. I remember, Nathaniel replied, his throat tight. But I forgot. I forgot how to care. Clara stepped forward, her voice gentle but firm. It's not too late, Nathaniel. Your mother wants you to remember who you are, what truly matters. Nathaniel met Clara's gaze, and for the first time, he felt a flicker of hope. I want to change, he said, determination creeping into his voice. I want to honor you, Mom. I want to make you proud. Beatrice's hand squeezed as gently, and a tear rolled down her cheek. You've already made me proud by being here now. Just promise me you'll carry my love with you, no matter where you go. The room was thick with emotion as Nathaniel nodded, overwhelmed by a surge of feelings he had long buried. I promise, he said, his voice steady now. I promise to carry your love. Clara stepped back, giving them a moment of privacy. She felt a swell of emotion herself, witnessing the healing that was beginning to unfold. She had hoped for this moment, where Nathaniel would finally confront his choices and embrace the love that had always been there, waiting for him to acknowledge it. As Nathaniel continued to hold his mother's hand, he felt a strange sense of clarity wash over him. The memories Clara had shared from the diary began to echo in his mind. The laughter, the stories, the warmth of his mother's embrace. He realized how far he had drifted from those moments, how he had allowed ambition to consume him. Mom, can you tell me more about those stories? He asked, his voice softer now. About the values you wanted to teach me? Beatrice's eyes lit up with a spark of energy as she began to speak. There was a time when kindness was the cornerstone of our lives. I wanted you to grow up knowing that helping others brings true joy. It's not the size of your bank account that defines you, but the size of your heart. Nathaniel leaned in closer, hanging on to every word. I want to learn, he said, his tone earnest. I've been so lost, but I want to find my way back. Beatrice smiled, pride evident in her weary eyes. You're already on your way, my dear. It starts with understanding that love is the most powerful force we have. It can heal. It can mend what is broken. Tears streamed down Nathaniel's face as he processed her words. I wish I had understood that sooner, he whispered. I've missed so much time. Clara watched the exchange, her heart swelling with hope. It was a beautiful moment, a testament to the strength of love and the possibility of redemption. She could see the transformation beginning in Nathaniel, the walls he had built around himself slowly crumbling. Mom, I want to honor you in every way I can, Nathaniel said, his voice steadying. I want to create a life that reflects the values you've instilled in me. I want to make a difference. Beatrice's smile widened, but there was a hint of sadness as she replied, You already have, Nathaniel. Just by being here, by opening your heart, that is what matters most. As Nathaniel wiped his tears, he felt a sense of peace enveloping him. He had spent so long chasing after wealth, thinking it would fill the void inside him. But now, in this moment, he understood that the true riches were the connections he had neglected to love that had been waiting for him to embrace it. Thank you for being my mother, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I'm so sorry for everything. Beatrice's eyes sparkled with tears. It's never too late, my love. Remember, love is what binds us together, even in the darkest times. As the minutes slipped by, Nathaniel held her hand tightly, vowing to never let go again. He knew he had much to atone for, but for the first time in a long while, he felt hopeful about the future. He would carry her lessons with him, and he would strive to be a better man, one worthy of her love. In that hospital room, surrounded by the beeping machines and the sterile smell of antiseptic, Nathaniel found a flicker of light within himself, a light that promised to guide him home. Nathaniel stood in the grand hallway of his mansion, the silence around him almost deafening. The opulence that surrounded him, marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and priceless artworks, felt more like a prison than a palace. He glanced at the gilded clock on the wall, its ticking echoing in his ears, reminding him of the time he had wasted, the moments he could never retrieve. His heart ached with regret as he thought of his mother, Beatrice, lying weak and frail in a hospital bed, while he had chosen parties and wealth over her. With a newfound determination, Nathaniel reached for his phone, scrolling through his contacts until he found Victor's name. The man had been a father figure to him, a mentor who had always encouraged him to look beyond the surface of life. Nathaniel pressed the call button, his heart pounding as he waited for Victor to pick up. "Hey, Nathaniel, what's up?" Victor's voice was warm and inviting, a stark contrast to the chill that crept into Nathaniel's heart. "I need to talk to you," Nathaniel replied, his voice shaky. "It's about my mother." "Is she?" Victor's tone shifted to concern. "No, not yet. But I think I want to do something for her. Something that matters," Nathaniel admitted, feeling the weight of vulnerability that had been absent for so long. "Let's meet. I'll be at the cafe in an hour," Victor suggested, his voice steady and reassuring. Nathaniel hung up and took a deep breath. He felt a flicker of hope igniting within him, a longing to honor Beatrice in a way that transcended mere inheritance. He envisioned a foundation, one that would give back to the community and help those in need, just as his mother had always done. An hour later, Nathaniel arrived at the cafe, a cozy little spot filled with the rich aroma of coffee and the soft murmur of conversation. He spotted Victor sitting at a corner table, his face lit up with a warm smile. Nathaniel felt a rush of gratitude for the man who had stood by him through thick and thin. "Hey, you look better," Victor remarked, motioning for Nathaniel to sit down. "I think I might actually be feeling better," Nathaniel replied, a small smile breaking through his earlier gloom. "I've been thinking about my mom and how much she always cared for others." Victor nodded, his expression shifting to one of encouragement. "You're not just your mother's son, Nathaniel. You can create something that reflects her values. It's never too late." Nathaniel leaned forward, his voice low but filled with excitement. "What if I started a foundation? Something that helps children in need shelters, education, healthcare. My mom always talked about wanting to make a difference." "That's a fantastic idea," Victor exclaimed, his eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. "You have the resources, and more importantly, you have the passion. Your mother would be proud." Nathaniel felt a swell of emotion at Victor's words, a sense of purpose washing over him. "I want it to be more than just a charity. I want it to be a legacy for her, a way to keep her spirit alive." "Let's brainstorm ideas," Victor suggested, pulling out a notepad. "We need to outline your vision. What do you want this foundation to achieve?" As they sketched out plans, Nathaniel's heart raced with excitement. He envisioned programs that would provide mentorship for underprivileged children, scholarships for higher education, and emergency aid for families in crisis. Each idea felt like a step closer to reconnecting with the mother he had taken for granted. The conversation flowed effortlessly, and Nathaniel found himself smiling for the first time in days. They discussed potential partnerships, fundraising strategies, and even names for the foundation. The more they talked, the clearer Nathaniel's vision became. "Let's call it the Beatrice Hawthorne Foundation," Victor suggested, and Nathaniel's heart swelled. It felt right honoring his mother, while embodying the mission of helping others. "Perfect," Nathaniel agreed, determination flooding through him. "I want to launch it as soon as possible. I have to make this happen." "Then let's get to work," Victor said, his enthusiasm infectious. "We'll need to gather a team, set up meetings, and start reaching out to potential donors." As they continued to brainstorm, Nathaniel found himself filled with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. He was no longer just a wealthy heir. He was a man with a mission, ready to make a difference in the world. Over the next few days, Nathaniel immersed himself in the foundation's development. He spent hours researching, meeting with nonprofit experts, and gathering information on what it would take to launch a successful charitable organization. Each step he took felt like a tribute to his mother, a way to finally acknowledge the sacrifices she had made for him. One afternoon, while poring over documents in his home office, Nathaniel's phone buzzed. It was a text from Clara, the nurse who had cared for Beatrice. "Nathaniel, I know your mother would be proud of you. She often spoke of wanting to help children. Let me know if you need any help with the foundation." A rush of gratitude filled Nathaniel. He quickly replied, "Thank you, Clara. I'd love to talk to you about it. Your insight would mean a lot." They arranged to meet the following day at the hospital. As Nathaniel made his way there, he felt a mix of nerves and excitement. Clara had been a comforting presence for his mother, and he hoped her perspective would enrich the foundation's mission. When he arrived, Clara greeted him with a warm smile, her scrubs a stark contrast to the clinical setting of the hospital. "Nathaniel, it's good to see you. I've been thinking about your mother a lot, and I'm glad to hear about the foundation." "Thanks, Clara," he said, his heart a bit lighter. "I really wanted to reflect her spirit and the love she had for helping others." They found a quiet corner in the hospital's waiting area, and Nathaniel shared his vision for the foundation. Clara listened intently, nodding and occasionally interjecting with thoughtful suggestions. "You know," she said, her eyes shining, "your mother often talked about providing mentorship programs. She believed that guidance and support could change a child's life." "That's exactly what I want to do," Nathaniel replied, his excitement building. "I want to create a network of mentors who can help guide kids through challenges, just like my mother did for me." Clara smiled, her face lighting up with enthusiasm. "That's a beautiful idea, Nathaniel. You'll be giving kids the tools they need to succeed and showing them that they're not alone." They spent hours brainstorming, and Clara's passion fueled Nathaniel's determination. Together, they mapped out ideas for outreach programs, community events, and partnerships with schools and local organizations. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow through the hospital windows, Nathaniel felt a sense of peace settle over him. For the first time in a long while, he was no longer consumed by regret. Instead, he was focused on creating something meaningful in honor of his mother. "Thank you, Clara," he said earnestly as they wrapped up their discussion. "I couldn't do this without your help." "It's my pleasure, Nathaniel. Your mother was an incredible woman, and I know she's watching over you," Clara replied, her voice soft and sincere. "You're going to make a real difference." As he left the hospital, Nathaniel felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. He was no longer just a man chasing wealth. He was a son honoring his mother's legacy. The foundation was not just a project. It was a mission that would shape his life and the lives of countless children. In the days that followed, Nathaniel worked tirelessly to bring his vision to life. He reached out to potential board members, organized fundraising events, and began to build a community around the foundation. Each step reinforced his commitment to honoring Beatrice and embracing the values she had instilled in him. As he stood in his office one evening, looking out at the city skyline, Nathaniel realized that he had finally found purpose in his life. His mother's love was alive in every decision he made, guiding him toward a brighter future for himself and others. Nathaniel stood at the front of the elegantly decorated ballroom, the golden chandeliers casting a warm glow over the crowd gathered for the launch of his foundation. The air was filled with the sound of clinking glasses and soft chatter, but it felt like a distant murmur to him. His heart raced, not just from the excitement of the event, but from the weight of his mother's legacy pressing heavily on his shoulders. Today was meant to be a celebration of Beatrice's memory, a chance to honor her dreams of helping children in need. Yet, as he glanced around the room, he couldn't shake the feeling of emptiness that had haunted him for so long. "Are you ready for this?" Victor's voice cut through Nathaniel's thoughts, grounding him in the present. The older man had been his mentor and guide throughout this journey, and Nathaniel appreciated his steady presence. "I think so," Nathaniel replied, forcing a smile. "It just feels surreal. I never thought I would be doing something like this." "You're doing it because you finally understand what truly matters," Victor said, his eyes glimmering with pride. "Your mother would be so proud of you." "Yeah," Nathaniel murmured, his thoughts drifting back to the moments he had shared with Clara. She had become more than just a nurse. She was a confidant, a bridge to his past, and a reminder of what he had lost. He remembered the first time he had seen her reading Beatrice's diary, her eyes misty with emotion. It was Clara who had helped him see the woman behind the illness, the mother who had loved him deeply, despite the distance that had grown between them. As Nathaniel moved through the crowd, greeting guests and thanking them for their support, he caught a glimpse of Clara across the room. She was standing near the entrance, her presence illuminating the space in a way that made him feel lighter. He approached her, taking a moment to admire how the soft fabric of her dress caught the light, framing her figure perfectly. "Clara," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, as he drew closer. "I'm glad you're here." "I wouldn't miss it for the world," Clara replied, her smile warm and genuine. "You've done an incredible job, Nathaniel. Your mother would be so proud." "Thank you," he said, his throat tightening with emotion. "I wish she could be here to see this. I wish I could have done more while she was still with us." Clara's expression softened as she placed a hand on his arm. "You've already done so much by honoring her legacy. This foundation is just the beginning." Nathaniel nodded, but before he could respond, a voice called out from behind him. "Nathaniel, everyone's waiting for you to give your speech." He turned to see one of the board members waving him over, and he felt a wave of nerves wash over him. "I should go," he said reluctantly, but Clara held his gaze, her eyes filled with encouragement. "Just speak from your heart." "They're here for you and for her," she replied, her voice steady. Taking a deep breath, Nathaniel moved toward the stage. The crowd quieted as he took his place at the podium, the spotlight shining down on him. He glanced at the audience, noting the familiar faces of friends, family, and even some of Beatrice's old acquaintances. They were all there to support him, yet he felt profoundly alone in that moment. "Thank you all for being here," he began, his voice steady but laced with emotion. "Today, we gather not just to celebrate the launch of this foundation, but to honor the memory of my mother, Beatrice Hawthorne. She was a woman of immense compassion and love who dedicated her life to helping those in need." As he spoke, he could see Clara in the crowd, nodding along, her eyes shining with pride. It gave him strength, and he continued. "My mother taught me the importance of empathy, of giving back, and of cherishing our loved ones. I lost sight of those values for a long time, but through her memories, I found my way back to what truly matters." He paused, collecting his thoughts, remembering Clara's gentle encouragement. "This foundation is a reflection of her dreams. We aim to support children in underserved communities, providing them with the opportunities they deserve. It is my hope that, through this work, we can create a legacy of love and support that my mother would have wanted." As Nathaniel spoke, he could feel the emotions rising within him, and he fought back tears. "I want to thank Clara, who has not only been a source of support, but has also shown me the depth of my mother's love through her stories. Clara, thank you for helping me reconnect with my mother, even in her absence." The audience erupted in applause, and Clara beamed at him, her eyes sparkling with pride. Nathaniel felt a rush of gratitude wash over him as he finished his speech. "Together, let's honor Beatrice's legacy and strive to make a difference in the lives of those who need it most. Thank you." As he stepped away from the podium, Nathaniel felt a sense of relief mixed with hope. He had shared his heart with the world, and for the first time in a long time, he felt a sense of purpose. After the speech, guests mingled, sharing their thoughts on the foundation and the impact it could have. Nathaniel was swept up in conversations, but his thoughts kept drifting back to Clara. Finally, he managed to break away from the crowd and found her standing near the back, observing the festivities with a gentle smile. "Clara," he called, making his way to her. "Did you really think I could do it?" "Of course. You were fantastic," she replied, her eyes shining with admiration. "You spoke from the heart, and that's what people needed to hear." "I couldn't have done it without you," he admitted, feeling a warmth spread through him. "You've been my anchor through all of this." Before she could respond, a familiar voice called from the side. "Nathaniel, can I have a word?" It was one of the board members. and Nathaniel excused himself, but he promised Clara he would return soon. As he spoke with the board member about future plans for the foundation, he couldn't shake the thought that he had something important to discuss with her. When he finally returned to Clara, he found her looking contemplative, a soft smile still gracing her lips. "You really did well tonight," she said, her voice warm as she looked into his eyes. "Nathaniel!" A voice boomed from behind him. It was Victor, who approached with a broad smile. "You've made quite an impression tonight. I think you've inspired a lot of people." "Thanks, Victor," Nathaniel replied, feeling a sense of camaraderie with the older man. "I just hope I can live up to this." As Victor continued to share his thoughts on the event, Nathaniel felt Clara's gaze shift, and he turned to find her looking at the entrance. His heart skipped a beat when he saw someone approaching an unfamiliar woman with striking features and an air of familiarity. "Nathaniel," the woman said, her voice soft yet firm. "I need to speak with you." He blinked in surprise, trying to place her. "Do we know each other?" She stepped closer, a soft smile gracing her lips. "I'm Clara's friend from childhood. I heard about the foundation and wanted to be here to support her. But more importantly, I wanted to talk to you about your mother." Nathaniel's heart raced. "My mother?" "Yes," the woman said, her expression serious. "I knew her well. Beatrice always spoke about her dreams for helping children. She had a vision, and you're bringing it to life." Nathaniel felt a rush of emotions flood him: curiosity, nostalgia, and a hint of trepidation. "What do you mean?" "Beatrice and I lost touch over the years, but she always held a special place in her heart for you," the woman continued. "And Clara, she's tied to all of this in a way you might not expect." Clara stepped forward, her expression shifting from surprise to understanding. "What are you saying?" The woman looked between them, and Nathaniel felt a sense of urgency. "I'm saying that this foundation isn't just a tribute. It's a legacy that weaves together all the love Beatrice had for both of you. Clara, you were meant to be a part of this journey." Nathaniel felt a tingle of realization. "You mean Clara was connected to my mother?" "Yes," the woman replied, her voice steady. "Clara's family was intertwined with your mother's in ways you might not know. This foundation isn't just a project. It's a way to honor your mother's vision while uniting the past with the present." Nathaniel's heart raced as he processed the revelation. "I had no idea. Clara, is this true?" Clara nodded, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "I didn't know until recently, but my family had been friends with yours long ago. I never connected the dots until we started working together on this foundation." Stunned, Nathaniel stepped back, trying to wrap his mind around the implications. "You knew all this time?" "I didn't want to overwhelm you with it," Clara replied, her voice trembling. "I wanted you to focus on your mother's legacy, not the past. But now, it feels like everything is coming together. Your mother's dreams, our shared history it's all a part of. Something bigger." Nathaniel felt a surge of emotion, his heart pounding in his chest as he looked at Clara with new eyes. "Tell me everything," he whispered, leading Clara to a quiet corner of the ballroom. The woman who had brought this revelation followed them, her presence a testament to the past that was about to unfold. Clara took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly. "Your mother, Beatrice, she was more than just my patient. Years ago, when I was very young, my family fell on hard times. Your mother ran a small charitable organization back then, before you became wealthy. She helped my parents get back on their feet, found my father a job, and even paid for my nursing school." Nathaniel's eyes widened with recognition. "That's why you became a nurse?" "Yes," Clara nodded, tears forming in her eyes. "I promised myself I would help others the way your mother helped me. When I recognized her name at the hospital, I couldn't believe it. I wanted to tell you, but you were so distant then, so angry. I thought it might push you away further. So all those stories you shared with me, the diary." Nathaniel's voice trailed off. were not just about documenting your mother's memories, Clara finished. They were my way of repaying her kindness, of making sure her legacy of love and compassion wouldn't be forgotten. The woman who had brought them together stepped forward. Beatrice never wanted recognition for her good deeds. She believed that true kindness should be given freely, without expectation of return. But she would be proud to see how her actions create a ripple effect, bringing both of you together to continue her work. Nathaniel reached for Clara's hand, squeezing it gently. All this time, you were the living embodiment of my mother's values. You were trying to show me the way back to who I was meant to be. Clara smiled through her tears. Your mother saved my life, Nathaniel. The least I could do was help save her son's soul. Victor approached them, having overheard the conversation. Now you see, Nathaniel, nothing in this life is coincidental. Your mother's love has been guiding you all along through Clara. Nathaniel looked around the ballroom, at the gathering of people who had come to support his foundation, and felt a profound sense of peace wash over him. His mother's legacy wasn't just in the charity work or the foundation. It was in the connection she had fostered, the lives she had touched, and the love she had spread. Turning back to Clara, he said softly, "Would you consider taking a more active role in the foundation? Help me continue what my mother started." Clara's face lit up with joy. "Nothing would make me happier," she replied. As the evening drew to a close, Nathaniel stood by the window, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance. Clara joined him, their shoulders barely touching. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "I spent so many years chasing wealth, thinking it would fill the void inside me. But my mother knew the truth all along. Real wealth is in the lives we touch and the love we share." Clara nodded, understanding in her eyes. She never lost faith in you, Nathaniel. She knew you would find your way back. "Thanks to you," he smiled, taking her hand in his. Together, they looked out at the city, both knowing that this was just the beginning of their journey. The Beatrice Hawthorne Foundation would become a beacon of hope for countless children, a living testament to a mother's love and the powerful legacy of kindness she left behind. And somewhere, Beatrice was smiling down on them, knowing that her son had finally learned the most valuable lesson of all, that true wealth lies not in the money we make, but in the lives we touch and the love we share.